Arutyunian, Karapetian,
Here.
Manasarian, Megardician,
Here.
Meek,
Here.
Miller,
Here.
Pulvelitis,
Here.
Smith,
Here.
and you. Okay.
So we do have a quorum, although we do have a few people out. Item 2, business agenda, report from the recording secretary, posting of the agenda.
Report recording secretary posting of the agenda. The agenda for May 1st, 2025 Charter Review Committee was posted on April 28th, 2025 on the bulletin board outside of City Hall.
Thank you. Next item up, oral communications. This is, discussion is limited to items not part of the agenda. Each speaker is allowed 3 minutes. Are there any speakers for items not on the agenda?
We have 2 requests to speak from the audience.
All right. Who's first?
Herbert Milano,
Thank you.
you have 3 minutes.
Commission Chair Flower, members of the commission, my name is Herbert Milano. If I had a magic wand and we're in the process of selecting 5 or 7 council members to propose for election, this would be the place where I would actually try to find those individuals. I think we're amazingly fortunate to have people who are in science and engineering, statistics, law, the finance, public policy. In this room, I think we have probably one of the best groups that I have ever participated in, at least from being present in the same room, with regard to the quality of the experience that you have to bring in. If you were to run to city council, you still have these gaps in knowledge that maybe others can actually fulfill. But one of the problems that I've seen in many of the issues that have faced us in Glendale in the past 25 years is the fact that there's sometimes a lot of overconfidence with regard to what they think they know, the ideology that basically blinds them to the particular issues that we may have to be confronted with, and confirmation bias. There's still a significant amount of knowledge that is still pending, and I have made some suggestions in item 7A later on. What I'm going to suggest to this group, if it is at all possible, is that once this commission is over, that maybe the members of this commission can consider creating an organization such that you can assist in overseeing and guiding the city council. Because if we do not get the type of council that we want and that we need a group that is going to oversee what is going on. Because I think it is a significant benefit for the city when you have such a low turnout rate that we need individuals who are going to participate in evaluating it. I attempted such a group about 10 years ago. It was called the Glendale Coalition for Better Government. Unfortunately, we were not able to pick from a group as fine as this one. And I'm going to suggest that once these sessions are over, that you seriously consider creating a group that would assist us in guiding the city council, providing, or maybe even finding those individuals that should be running for city council. Hopefully we can avoid some of the major mistakes that we have made in the past, such as the mistake that was made in 2001 that cost us over $1 billion, and we're still paying for it with regard to the pension system due to that lack of knowledge and lack of awareness. So something for you to keep in mind, and you're just planting the seeds so that something like this can come to fruition. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Milano. The next speaker is Alan Dish. And Chair, we have 2 callers on the line as well.
Thank you.
Chair, Charter Committee, good evening. My name is Alan Dish. I'm here because I think our situation, to cut it short, is complex but urgent. Case in point, I gave a speech at City Council this Tuesday, yes, asking for the mayor to basically install some kind of, or impose rather, some kind of emergency measures to stop tree cutting that was plaguing certain development of, on North Central, and for ecology, fires and so on. His response, very intelligent, was not that he cannot do, not that he would not do it, rather, but that he cannot, that we have to look at the charter and so on. So I'm here to urge you, basically, in so many ways that I think the situation today, and I'm open here, it's post-democratic in the sense that we are facing certain issues from ecology, the fires, and so on, to local developers maybe that will require some kind of strong decisions, and we will also need some kind of charismatic leader. Now, this has been done in the past before in a different way by FDR, no, in the sense that he also, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, was doing certain things where he was not he was bypassing Congress, and okay, Trump is doing it now too, but not in the direction of ecology. My hope is that we can have a situation where the charter could open up the space. That's the key. The possibility for having some kind of a charismatic, slightly, I cannot put it other ways, in a different way, dictatorial position, because that's my pessimism, but with which I will conclude hopefully with some optimism that we need to see how our situation is. It's our fate, ecology. Like if we do nothing about environmental concern, then it will happen in the sense of some big calamity. But if we are able to have the courage to make a choice or make some kind of move beforehand, then we might stop the problem, and then we will say we overreacted, but at least we stopped it. So I stop because we started late, and nonetheless, I appreciate your time very much. I like this number 12 because the apostles were also 12 and so on. But I thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And I will leave, but come back because there's another meeting. Thank you.
We have, you said 2 callers?
Yes, we have 2.
All right, go ahead.
Good evening, Patrick Murphy. You are live with the Charter Review Committee. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I am calling to recommend that the committee recommends to council for an elected city attorney. We have seen over the last several years where this city attorney is essentially not doing his job. If the treasurer and the clerk are elected positions, then the city attorney should be an elected position. It's as important, if not more important. The most recent example was the selection of the mayor process. On April the 1st, the city attorney told all of us, when asked by Councilmember Garpetian if he was next in line, the city attorney confirmed that he was next in line because Councilmember Kasakian declined the position for this coming year. I want to read something from the charter in chapter 2.04.020 in the selection of mayor. Subsection H, which was used last year and used again this year. However, it was never formally invoked at that meeting on April the 15th. It states, notwithstanding the provision of this section, in the event the council determines in its discretion that is in the best interest of the city not to appoint the council member next in line to serve as mayor in accordance with the procedure of this section, including but not limited to, because of reason of mental or physical incapacity, limiting the ability to perform mayoral duties, or a criminal conviction, then the council may appoint the next qualified council member. They never said that council member Garpetian was not qualified. They just skipped over him. The city attorney sat and said nothing. On April the 1st, he stated that council member Garpetian was next in line. He is kowtowing, if I can use that term, to the votes. He had 4 votes. His salary is approved by the council. And so he floats with the way that the wind is blowing with these votes. This needs to be an elected position, the city attorney's office. And that's basically all I have to say. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy.
You said there was one more?
Yes. Susan Wolfson, you're live
Hi.
with the Charter Review Committee. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, committee members, and thank you for taking time to listen to me. I appreciate the work that you're doing, and I know it's not easy, and I'll keep my remarks brief. My remarks are germane primarily to things that I would like to see added to the charter. One thing I will agree with the previous caller. I do think, and I'm not going to criticize our current city attorney or any of that, but I do believe that an elected city attorney is something that has become, we're ready for that, and I think it's something that ought to be added to the charter. The other thing that I'd like to see added to the charter is I would like to see qualifications specified for the city treasurer. And again, I'm not doing this out of any criticism of the current incumbents or people that are doing the job, but I do believe that it would be best, since that is an elected position and it's not clear what the qualifications would be. For the attorney, obviously, it's very clear the person must be an attorney. However, for the city treasurer, it would be very easy to have somebody run for office who really doesn't have qualifications to be making the decisions that that position is called upon to make. And as we all may remember, 30 years ago, there was a terrible disaster in Orange County with a treasurer who was not qualified. So I personally, it's going to sound bad because I am a CPA, but I do think that maybe embedding in the charter requirement that the city treasurer be a CPA with a clear record at the State Board of Accountancy, I think that might be a good addition to our charter. So again, thank you so much for your service, and thank you for taking my comments. Good night.
Thank you.
Chair, those are all of our speakers.
All right, thank you. Next up is approval of the minutes. These are the minutes from our last meeting on April 3rd. Does anybody have any changes, corrections, any discussion? If not, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I so move.
All right. we have
Second.
a Motion from Mr. Meek, second from the vice chair. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? One abstention.
I abstain as well.
Oh,
not present.
2 abstentions. Okay. Thank you. Item 5 is staff comments.
We have no comments.
Okay. Item 6 is reports, information. Blank item, is there anything? Okay. We are just moving through this. Great. Okay. Item 7, business discussion items. There's 2 topics, A and B, council salaries and campaign contribution limits. I believe we're going to get a staff report.
You will. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think for this discussion this afternoon/evening, what we'd like to do is just provide you an overview of the council salary discussion, as the council has directed that the committee look into, as well as provide some overview of campaign finance, our local regulations. And we were not seeking any decision points here, but just to provide this information to you, see what questions you have, get, if you have initial feedback, and then you can provide us some direction on what you might want to see us bring back for further discussion at a subsequent meeting. So, Greg, if I can get that slide deck up. Next slide, please. So I think as we discussed when at the outset of this process, when the council established the Charter Review Committee, there were certain subject areas where the council had previously had discussion on. And so as part of that, as part of this committee's function, asked that the committee look at this issue and provide some thought into it and discussion and provide a recommendation ultimately. But let me give you a little bit of the background, how we got here. The city compensation and salary of elected council members, treasurer, city clerk, is a municipal affair. And if you remember from the early discussions we had, there are matters that are municipal affairs, and there are matters that are matters of statewide concern where the state has the authority to basically dictate what a local municipality must do. But in the area of council's compensation, that's something that a charter city can certainly implement on its own, notwithstanding what state law provides. However, the city, a number of years ago, when it adopted the charter amendments back in 2005, implemented what is the state law provisions regarding council salaries into our charter. And so in Article 4, Section 3, that's essentially what it does. There's a salary range based on a city's population, and then the city councils are authorized to make adjustments to that on an annual basis if it so chooses. So at the time that this provision was implemented in the charter, the salary range, the range for a city of 150 to 250,000 was $800 per month, plus 5% increases, and that was a 5% increase that a city council could adopt on an annual basis. If it waited a couple years, then it could combine those together. If it waited, they weren't compounded; they were just annual. But city council could always do it on an annual basis as well. Effective 2024, the state legislature actually amended that legislation, Government Code Section 36516, to provide that a salary range of a city of our size could be $2,550 per month, plus increases of 5% per year, or a CPI adjustment on an annual basis not to exceed 10% per year. And again, the city council has not taken advantage of this provision since 2024 and hasn't increased the salaries for council members since 2013. The state law that is incorporated into our charter also provides that there's no automatic increases, so we can't, if you're following state law, you can't have a provision that says council salary shall increase by 5% or by CPI. The council actually has to make that decision. And then increases under the state law, salary increases or salary adjustments won't take effect when adopted by a city council until at least one new council member starts a new term. So at least one council member, starts a new term. So if, for example, the council were to adjust the salaries of council members this year, those salary adjustments wouldn't take effect until 2026 when we have a new election. And so the current salary for council members is $1,430 per month. So there have been a number of adjustments since the 2005 adoption. I would note that that's only the salary that council members receive. That doesn't include the health insurance that's paid for by the city. That's also authorized by state law. And then in addition, our council members also serve as members of the Housing Authority. Under state law, they are permitted to receive compensation in the amount of $50 per meeting attended. So if they don't attend a meeting, the compensation is not paid, but they do. It's part of the salary that council members receive as members of the Housing Authority. So as part of this discussion, next slide, please. When we started, let me give a little bit of background. So the council's had an initial discussion starting in 2023 about adjustments to salaries, and a couple of reasons stated for considering adjustments to what is currently paid, and perhaps whether it's complying with state law or an adjustment above and beyond what state law provides, is just the significant amount of time that council members are engaged. It is a part-time position. All the council members, they have professions outside of being a council member, but they are still expected to, devote a significant amount of time, not just to the council meetings themselves, getting ready for council meetings, given, Glendale's place as a significant player in regional issues, Burbank, Glendale, Pasadena Airport, Southern California Association of Governments. A lot of all the council members, I think, serve on at least one or more external boards. So there's participation in those activities. Some of those are compensated separately, like the airport, but most of them are not. And then just going to community events, attending community matters, meeting with constituents, which they do frequently. So those are some of the. I'm not saying yes. Those are things that should sway you and make a recommendation. But those are some of the reasons that were proffered for considering adjustment to salaries. An additional issue or argument that's made by those that favor adjusting compensation or salaries that are paid to council members is sort of the economic diversification of the council members. Typically, though there's been a historical trend maybe for many council members to have been either retired or perhaps have their own businesses where perhaps they have a little more flexibility than somebody who has a job where they're professional, that they're required to essentially go to work every day, which is very challenging when you have to take a day off to go to council meetings and do that sort of thing. So again, that's something that's been proffered as far as a reason why council salaries should be adjusted. Some of the cons, again, it's intended to be a voluntary position. It's not an employment position. It's not expected to be an employment position. And so those who are opposed to this have expressed the view that it should be essentially remain as a voluntary position. Yes, there's time devoted to it. There are benefits that you get from devoting that time and being involved as a council member. And therefore, in some cities have higher salary ranges than we do, and I'll go through that in a minute. While others, like maybe Burbank and Pasadena, are kind of in line with where we're at today. Next slide, please. So many charter cities have different ways of calculating how salaries for the council members are paid for or identified in the charter. Some cities have they establish the base salary in the charter with periodic or annual adjustments, whether it's a percentage cap or CPI. Long Beach or Santa Clara, a couple of examples. Long Beach's council members currently make about, and I've also, in addition to the slide deck, we did have a table here that we provided the more detailed information regarding what some of these cities, these charter cities, pay in terms of council member salaries. So Long Beach is in the range of $3,500 per month for the council members and $14,000 a month for their mayor, but I would note that their mayor is a directly elected full-time position, and whereas Santa Clara pays $2,000 a month for their council members and $2,500 for their mayor. Some cities tie the council salaries to a specific income or wage index. So Santa Barbara's, for example, the mayor makes 100% of the area median income in Santa Barbara County, and where the council members make 80% of area median income. Just to give you an order of magnitude, in LA County, the area median income is $68,000. So if you had a mayor in our city making area median income, that's what the salary would be. Chula Vista, some charter cities tie their council salaries to certain positions. For example, I cited Chula Vista here in the slide deck. Chula Vista's mayor makes 66% of what a Superior Court judge salary is, and the council members make 40% of that. So that's a $152,000 salary for the mayor and $61,000 for the council members. Some cities have a salary review commission, or salary setting commission. Pasadena has done this, but it was on a one-time basis, so they established it to make a recommendation on salaries that were subsequently adopted by council. And some cities like Sacramento have a periodic review of council member salaries. Some cities have it so that the council can establish the salaries by ordinance. I would note that this was a discussion in Glendale in 2015 when we discussed some of those other charter amendments. There was a charter amendment that was proposed that would allow the council to establish salaries by ordinance. It failed by a significant vote. I think that's perhaps viewed in light of some of these other options, it's giving full discretion to the council, and I think politically that was probably something that just was not viewed favorably, and so that approach didn't move forward. As I noted, many cities, like Glendale, many cities just follow state law. Their charter specifically, like ours, says follow state law. And some charters are silent, which if the charter is silent, some cities will have then adopted their own ordinances. So it's almost the same as saying council can adopt your own ordinance. So those are some of the options that the city council, when they discussed this in 2023, I believe, that they discussed. That's some of the parameters of what this committee can look at, but we're certainly happy to look at other models or bring back some additional information. I have some information on campaign finance, but perhaps I want to see if it's up to you, Mr. Chair, if you want to see if there's any questions.
Yeah, I'd rather.
Yeah. That sounds good.
Start off with any questions. Third time here. I'm just going to go around.
I do have a question. What's the typical salary increase in the city for other employees?
It varies because those are pursuant to contract. So almost all the employees are represented by bargaining organizations, and so it's depending on what the nature of the contract is for those employees. So I'm not sure that's the best model to utilize for.
Is it in that 5% range?
It just depends. Sometimes it's been 4%, sometimes it's 1% or 0. Yeah.
Okay. I just wouldn't want to have them get more pay than any other employee per year, is my thought.
Thanks, Chair. Mr. Garcia, sorry to pare it back just to make sure I understand. So currently, the salaries are governed by charter, which basically incorporates state law.
That's correct.
And state law provides that the increases subsequent to it being set are decided by the council by ordinance. Is that correct?
They're adopted by ordinance, but they're limited under state law to the 5% per year.
Correct. Okay, got it. And so since 2013, when the last increase happened, it hasn't moved.
That's correct.
And it's been discussed at council about the increase has been discussed, and should they choose to increase it, they can only increase it by 10%.
No, so they can, under state law today, they could do it up to the 2,500.
Up to the 25.5.
And they can also do, after that, they could do 5% per year or CPI, so whichever's more, but not to exceed 10%.
But they couldn't proactively make that decision. They would have to come back effectively every year and say, this year we're going to give ourselves a 5% raise?
Correct.
Okay.
And typically what happens, you would do, what I've heard or what I've seen is it's because you have 2-year election cycles, so maybe we'll do it for the previous 2 years, and then it would take effect after the next election.
Okay. Do we get the range here that you provided is pretty wide.
Yeah.
Do we have a general sense what other similarly sized cities, not in terms of what the compensation is, and these aren't employees. I think you made it clear it's essentially a volunteer position. What the cadence or the frequency of increases are for similarly sized cities?
It really varies because it's a policy and political decision, frankly. So I think it varies in terms of the increases.
Okay.
Some cities just they'll do it, every 2 years they'll do it. And I've heard of, like Glendale, that we haven't done it in a while because it's,
Okay. Last question, I'll wrap it up. So if we stuck to state law, we would be expressly prohibited from putting into the charter that once a salary is set, it will increase by X% a year, and to be revisited every 5 years in a salary setting session or something to that effect.
correct. Although as a charter city, we could put in, I
We
think
could do
we
that.
could put in a provision that trumps that provision of state law.
Okay, great. Thank you.
When they say that council member is a voluntary position, that's language that's called out in the charter?
No, I think it's just in terms of because it's a council manager form of government, and the council members are part-time, meaning that they set policy, they they're not employees in the sense that they have to report to work at 8:30 in the morning and leave at 5:30. That's kind of what we meant.
I was just curious.
Yeah.
I know, I lied. I totally forgot. I know we don't have that information here, but in terms of the total benefits package, for lack of a better term,
Yeah.
there's this compensation, this stipend, whatever you want to
Yeah.
call it. There is health care, which is a benefit. There's a nominal $50 a meeting. Is there any, and maybe the external committees that they sit on, and I don't expect it today, but is there a way we can get a sense for how much the total benefit is?
We could get that for you, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Unless you have another question, too.
So first question for you, has there been any specific reason that there hasn't been any adjustment since 2013 preventing it from happening, or no?
It would require a council member to ask for that item to come and for the council to discuss, and that just hasn't happened.
Okay. So the total benefits package that Paul asked about, that is, can we get the minimum and maximum possible? Because the number of hours that are calculated, basically, if they're present at meetings, that's going to give us different amounts. If they don't participate, obviously, they're not getting paid for that amount, right?
For Housing Authority, for council, it's just a straight stipend, yes.
Okay, yeah, all of it, if possible. Thank you.
Aside from the salary and health insurance, they also get like mileage and other forms of compensation?
They get reimbursement for certain expenses. I don't know if Mr. Totalian, for expenses?
Yes, they will get reimbursed for mileage and any kind of travel expenses that are within the purview of their job description or duties.
So if we send somebody to a convention, do they pay for that and then get reimbursed, or does the city pay for that?
No, we will pay for that. We'll make all the travel arrangements. And then if there's any expenses that they incurred while they were at the conference, then they would submit a travel reimbursement request with a justification and receipts if necessary, and we would reimburse them as part of their regular pay.
Subject to our travel reimbursement policies.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And completing your AB 1234 training.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Okay, thanks.
I just want to confirm for the committee, council members don't get any pension benefits?
No, they do. Yeah, they do.
They do get pension benefits.
So you could come back and give us more of a fully loaded cost?
It would.
I mean,
we could. It would be the
with
same benefit factor.
medical and pension?
Sure.
Yeah.
We could do that. I mean, the pension cost would be different for each one depending on the number of years served in that capacity. Their compensation is the same, so that shouldn't change. But the medical would change depending on which plan that they selected. So it would be a range we can share with you.
And just so I understand, the current council could at any time vote to increase their salary to the new state amount?
That's correct.
The 2550?
Correct.
So it wouldn't take any change to the charter for them to do that?
That's correct.
Would we be able to amend the charter to say whenever there's a change in the state code with respect to, the amount per month plus the increases for inflation, so that it just automatically moved along without council having to vote for it?
I think the answer is yes. I want to look at it, but I think the answer is yes. If we wrote it in such a way that gave the authority to make that change.
Because I'm sure that one reason the council hasn't been voting for 5% increases is they think it may not look good to the residents and the voters and may be reluctant to do that. I don't know, but it
That may
seems
be
like
one reason.
they're forgoing their possible increases and keeping it fairly low.
Is that it? Denise?
In regards to coming back to us with the total package, Could you also just speak to, I know that there's some preparation each week provided by, that council must participate in prior to each council meeting. And specifically our staff, are there staff resources that help them, prep them? Other costs to the city is what I'm really getting at, beyond just this city council salary.
Are you asking if there's
Do they have assigned staff?
assigned staff?
They don't have assigned staff. There are staff that's made available to them, in advance of council meetings to answer the questions regarding upcoming council items. There's also obviously staff in the city manager's office that when we have events that they're attending and they're going to be speaking, for example, help them get them information for that event. When they're attending their committee meetings, there might be staff from city manager's office who might help them get any materials they might need, but council members do not have assigned staff. And the only comment I provide to that, though, is the council has asked for an informational item from staff to discuss that issue. So we'll be discussing it during budget.
So they can't direct those staff people?
Right. Correct. They don't individually, they don't have their own staff members. They're staff from the city manager's office and other departments who help them with those things.
Who are already employed and paid.
That's correct.
So just following on that, to follow up, again, what the questions I'm really trying to ask are about direct costs, which are the salary, and then also the indirect costs, or the costs we don't see. So they also all have an office on site here, right?
Yeah.
Is any of that factored in, or are we paying for that? You see where I'm going? Because
Sure.
I'm looking at the total package.
I
can
understand.
answer
You want to say?
I mean, yeah, sure. Each council member does have an office here at City Hall. However, that office is only to be used for official city business. They can't use the office for any other purpose. For example, if they had a business, they can't take clients in City Hall to operate their business. That's really to be used only for city functions.
Yeah, and to that point, I mean, although that's certainly a factor, certainly I'm sure city managers always always appreciate that type of question. It's not a salary or a health or non-salary benefit necessarily that can be attributed to the council member.
Okay.
So
So it's not a non-salary benefit?
Yeah, yeah.
So, okay. So then that gets thrown out in the thinking about the total package. And last and final question, so when they go to all these different events, obviously, as we think through Glendale, there's parking involved. So do they pay for their own is that part of mileage and reimbursement? Do they have a parking pass? What do they have?
We will cover the cost of their admission if it's a ticketed event, unless it's been comped to the individual council member. And if they did incur any costs associated with that for parking or any other true justifiable associated costs, we would also reimburse them for that.
Okay. And again, I recognize I recognize that that's doing business as, so I'm not trying to but there are some elements of different events they go to that are included as well, in the interest of doing business as. Okay, thanks.
Carl? Oh.
All right, so first question, do we know the average amount of commitment as far as time goes?
it's hard to answer that because it varies depending upon council member.
Okay, so.
Yeah.
They all work very hard, though.
They all do work very hard.
Right.
But no, in
just
fairness,
wanted to-
some are retired.
Of course,
And,
of
you
course.
know, some are
They have
not,
more
so-
time too. Yes, of course, I understand. The second question is just a follow-up question to what Ms. Miller asked. So please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we discussed staffing for council members in the past, and that was an estimated cost of one-time estimated cost of $700,000 for, everything to get staff for them. Am I correct?
Can't remember if that was the number.
I was
John.
3 meetings before this.
I don't remember what the number was. I can try to
think it
go
was
back and take a
700,
look at
yeah.
what the staff report was, with it and respond back to you, but it essentially would have been dependent on whether it was a full-time staff person, part-time, the benefits. So if you give us maybe 10 minutes, I can come back and answer that
That's fine,
question.
but my question is that regardless of the whatever suggestion we make, that part is going to happen, basically. They're going to get the staff, so that
Not
doesn't really...
necessarily.
It's not necessarily.
Okay.
It's something that's
Yeah.
been discussed, but
It's been
Okay.
discussed, and it's coming back for another discussion.
Understood. Thank you.
No decision has been made on it
that's,
yet.
correct me if I'm wrong, that's not really a charter topic either.
Right.
Okay.
Most of the questions that I had have already been asked and mostly answered, but now I just want to make sure that my math is right. So the sole compensation that council members get right now is $14.30 a month, plus, I'm going to round it to roughly $100 a month for Housing Authority, at $50 a meeting for 4 meetings a month.
How often do they meet?
I'm assuming weekly. The council.
Housing Authority?
Housing Authority, I'm assuming weekly.
They have 2 meetings a month.
2 meetings a month? So $100 a month for Housing Authority, and that's the limit of their compensation?
Plus benefits.
Right, I got that. And is PERS required?
It's a good question. I believe it. It's a good question. I believe it is. I believe anybody who's on the agency's payroll as part of the PERS contract has to be included in the contract. You can't exclude a certain segment, but we can probably dig into that just a little bit more.
That's all I have for right now.
All right. Yeah, I don't have very many questions because been some good questions already. I did have a question though about the health benefits. Is that tied to what the staff is also getting? Or I know there's lots of different bargaining groups. Do they establish their health benefit? I mean,
they don't establish their own health benefits per se. It is grouped together with the executive compensation and benefit plan.
whatever they get.
Right, it's part of the class and
But they
comp
also
resolution.
approve
that.
that too. Right. Yeah. Okay.
They do approve that, yes.
Yeah. And since we had a caller who mentioned the other elected officials, the treasurer and the clerk, how are their salaries established? Or salary compensation,
Sure.
whatever you want to
So
call it.
their salaries are established by the city council and by salary resolution. And it's been I think the city clerk got an adjustment in the last year. And yeah, so they're both compensated. Their compensation is more in line with what a full-time employee would be.
Okay, they are expected to be full-time?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
That's interesting. Okay. That's all the questions I have. Are there any more?
Just because it is one of the models, do we know the median income of Glendale by chance?
Yeah, so it's LA County's area median income.
Oh, it's the same as LA
Yeah,
County.
yeah.
That's the area.
Right.
Well, I thought maybe we broke it out different.
No.
68, is it?
For a one-person household, that is,
Okay.
there's the area median income. It's higher but that's how, like when Santa Barbara does it, that's how they do it, their area median income for one-person household.
So.
Sure. Maybe as one point of clarification in response to committee member Megardician's question about staffing costs. During the February meeting, during the staff presentation, we projected an annual estimate of $750,000 of annual costs related to staffing and expanded council. So that wasn't related to current council staffing costs. That was an estimate, a projection for staffing and expanded council, whereby staff would be assigned to the council members.
And a greater expectation, if you had districts, you're more likely to end up with individual staff members for each council member.
All right. I'll throw the floor open and up. Do we have anybody who wants to comment from the public at this point?
Thank you very much for recognizing my card. My name is Herbert Molano. I want to address, and I submitted to you 4 pages with regard to this particular issue. I'll summarize the important parts of this. By the way, you can get all of the salaries and compensation if you do a Public Records Act request. I did a quick review of what the total compensation was for Councilmember Elena Satrian. That was $50,000, all combined with regard to benefits and all the benefits in salary and so on. So she received $50,000 last year. Now, what I want to make a suggestion is that the city adopt the median family income, not the median singular income, but the median family income of the city of Glendale. I think that the council members and the public should have an annual recognition of what that is. Today is $84,000, a little bit over $84,000 a year. I'm sorry, as of 2 years ago. So it's somewhere in between 84 and 85,000, the median family income. But there has to be a recognition of the fact that the median family income sometimes decline. And it declined between 2010 and it took until 2019 to recover. So whenever we have a downturn, the council members should feel and recognize that the median family income is declining in many years when situations go bad. And if we tie that their compensation based upon that number, it gives us that recognition that they know, so that when they go into the negotiations for the MOU, they themselves have the experience of what those salaries really are and what the population is, the burden that the population has. The other thing about clarifying a number that is much larger than today is that this number is roughly about half of what the city treasurer is getting paid in overall compensation. So it fits pretty well, I think, for what some people believe is a part-time position, but it is not. Really, if you're preparing properly for the city council, it's a 40-hour week. If you're studying everything judiciously and doing due diligence that is required to make good decisions. So those are really two good reasons to tie it in. But I actually added a couple more things to my suggestion. It is that the lack of experience and education with regard to city matters impacts the city in a very, very significant way. If somebody comes to the city without really having a sense of what crime trends are, or how statistics should be used, or how sampling should be done, or all the studies that you need to do with housing, they are in a significant deficiency with regard to making good, sound decisions. So I made a suggestion based upon the experience that I've had for the past 24 years of what I think is needed to have council members that are making judicious, wise decisions that they can bring to the table. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other speakers?
No, that was the only speaker.
All right. I just have a question for the city attorney. Can we have a provision in our charter that provides for the decrease in the salary of the council members during their term?
Yeah. Apologies. I believe if the voters approve that, that can be allowed.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Floor is open.
I just wanted to respond to the public speaker's comments. I think, if you're talking about the Great Recession, median family income is declining because of high unemployment. But therefore, I don't think it's really relevant for the city council, who is fully employed in those periods, to necessarily be taking a cut in pay. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. People who stay employed during recessions typically don't see their income go down.
Also, there's very little that I think a city council can do to reverse a recession. So I understand the point that they should be sympathetic to what people are going through, but
they weren't the cause.
But they're not the cause, and they're not, yeah.
They shouldn't be penalized if they're not the cause.
I agree. Any other thoughts on this topic generally? The floor is open.
I have one question, one comment. Tonight is not the only night we're addressing this, right?
Correct.
Okay. So, and then the comment being is, does anyone wish, I recognize it's listed as council salaries, and at this juncture, is anybody so moved to state that the charter is as it is, and why go further? Just wondering for discussion purposes.
I'll jump in. My not having thought about this at length, I think my initial reaction is not having visited this topic in some time requires it to be revisited, probably by this group, and probably Alan, Mr. Durham has a point in terms of why it hasn't been visited by council, which is really the only body other than a charter amendment to revisit it. So I think we should revisit it. I do think it may need some adjustment, but do we? I think that for me, the way I approach this is that this is not a paid position. It's not an employment position, right? It's not a full-time job. and we shouldn't compare it to full-time jobs, because the manager, the city manager and the city staff run the city day to day. And I think the council's job is to advise and consent and to lead, and not necessarily run like a manager would. So I think we should revisit it, and I think making it maybe easier to adjust without having to put the focus on the council to, raise their own salary, which is kind of, it's probably not good practice.
It's a tight spot for them to.
Yeah,
I'm sympathetic to them.
Yeah, so I don't think, from a structural perspective, that's probably the wrong way to do it, is my instinct.
It occurs to me, looking at this, I thought, why do so many people have a commission? Because that just seems ponderous, but outsourcing the decision, have somebody else weigh in.
Yeah, and I think that's probably a good way to do it.
I don't love the idea of like proliferation of commissions, but now I see the political utility of it.
Well, I think you bring
For
up a
that
good
decision.
point, Chair. I think you bring up a good point, and I think this probably, my initial reaction is you probably don't need a commission, because this shouldn't happen as frequently, and the change should not be as robust, because this is not a job, right? This is, so if this was a job and should be adjusted every year to meet market, whatever market is, good luck figuring that out, then I see that maybe the value in a commission. But I do think we should probably find a way to maybe make it easier to adjust this and not put the focus on the council for them to vote for their own increase, which is just is not good practice.
Respectfully, if I can just clarify my comments. I didn't intend to go down that path, but where I'm really trying to go is there really a problem with the language? I recognize that there's political issues, as you've indicated, by council having to adjust this and how the public may perceive it. But if it's written in policy language, which is based on state law, which is representative of what other cities do, and it's a percentage increase, and it can be backed by evidence, I'm hard-pressed to think voters wouldn't understand that. And so, or constituents wouldn't get that. And so if council does follow the language of the law and does look at the best evidence and comes back with their facts about which percent, and of course takes all the public comment, then, then they could do it. And so I'm not giving them a pass.
Mr. Garcia, could you, the last increase, which was in 2013, was that by ordinance? It was voted on by council?
Yes.
Okay.
Have there been agendized discussions about raising it in a given year since then?
No.
It's just never.
It's never been raised by council member.
And so functionally, us as a charter review committee, if we would have to suggest a change to the charter, and if we did suggest a change, I'm just thinking out loud, which is dangerous.
Go for it.
We wouldn't put a discrete number in it, right? We wouldn't say it's $2,500 starting, with this amendment, it is now $2,500 and shall increase at 5% a year, or CPI.
You could make that recommendation.
We could make
Some
that.
cities have that
Okay.
very structure.
Okay.
But again, I think to your point, also or somebody made the point, the recommendation could be no change to the charter, just recommend that the council consider what it can now authorize pursuant to state law, which is up to $2,500.
Well, that's stating the obvious.
Right.
So I don't think, they probably understand that component. I think my instincts are telling me we want to make it easier to not get behind the curve and just kind of keep up with what it should be. And some may say what it is right now is too much, right? It's an opinion, but I need to think about it a little bit more.
Please, Carl.
Mr. Garcia, just a question on the $2,500. Is that number the inflation-adjusted number from way back in 2013 when the state law was passed, or was that the cap way back when?
No, so the cap was 800,
Okay.
and then the legislature modified that section of the government code effective January 1, 2024, to adjust it to $2,550.
Okay. Now, does state law, so 2024, in 2025, does state law automatically adjust that cap upward, or is that up to each individual local government
have to
to
enact their own
either
increase?
enact a 5% or a
Right.
CPI?
Yeah, it's not automatic. You have to
okay.
adjust it.
Okay.
So we could, leave it pretty much as it is right now and just add that it does a cost of living adjustment. Whatever the cost of inflation or is, like 2.1%.
The city could put.
We could make it automatic?
Right, yes. I think the city could put forth a charter amendment that made it automatic. I would note, though, not having talked to the council about that part of it, there might be some concern about doing that, because in lean years, economic lean years, when you see employees not getting increases, or just generally, and then council members are automatically getting, give you an example, 5%, I think some council member, and all the council members, would be concerned about how that appears to the public. And I'm just telling you, that's a concern they may raise. But it's certainly, legally, it's an option available to the city to put forth to the voters.
Okay.
Are there any existing mechanisms, commissions, or bodies that could visit the stipend, I don't want to call it compensation, whatever, issue on a regular basis, say every 5 or 10 years?
I don't think there's any existing commission that would have the authority to review that.
Not the authority, but.
I mean, we could give them the authority.
I mean, yeah,
Charter,
I'm saying
commission, I guess,
functionally
yeah.
speaking, do you have a
Yeah.
group of people who kind of think
Rather than
about
create
this?
a whole new commission, is there a commission where this decision could
Yeah, because
more naturally lie?
Because I think you should. It shouldn't be. The frequency strikes me as not something that needs to be revisited every year, but perhaps every 5 or 10 years it should be and I don't think that constitutes reason for a whole new commission with a whole new set of rules and everything. But a body that already stands that can every 5 or 10 years take up this topic and review it within the, and we can maybe put the constraints of state law, to and perhaps that's something we can think about.
I would note, if you limit it to state law, then I think the council on its own could create a salary review committee. You wouldn't need a charter amendment to do that.
We just say $5 more than Burbank.
If the,
So college coaches do it.
yeah, some. I've seen some
How-
contracts written that way. Got to be a particular step in the process. If the council were hypothetically to create a commission to review that, and the commission comes up with a number, I guess it then depends on the charter language whether that number is automatically approved, or whether council then has to approve their own.
Correct.
Their own raise.
Correct.
All right.
It's either.
I think the purpose of having the commission at that point is just to be cross political cover, but actually just have said, look, a different body looked at it and this was the recommendation, and so we're going to approve it.
Correct. I think that's
I
probably.
think that's why we're here.
Yeah, I mean,
on this question.
that's prudent, and it feels wise to me that people sitting in a chair can't set their own salaries, that they don't pay, they don't generate the income that pays that salary.
So foundationally, if what's before us, if we were to look at how it's written, look at the state law, we could, as a review committee, put items within the language, like the word automatic, or to reviewed every 5 years. Those could be stepping stones that could improve the language, that could take some of the political piece out of it that council currently faces, but it also puts some of the onus on them. For example, let's say I mean, 2013 to 20, when did you say the last salary increase was?
2013.
2013 to 2025. I guess where I'm trying to go in my long way of asking this question is there a way, there are ways for us to help with this language to get it to a place that it would not be 12 years without some sort of
Correct, yeah. You could
increase.
certainly, the
By-
committee could recommend a process to be included in the charter to say, you know, there shall be a salary review commission that convenes every 3 years and reviews the salaries. That's just an example. And then you could set what the limitations would be, for example, but shouldn't approve any adjustment above CPI, 10%, 5%, whatever. You could, the committee could certainly recommend parameters for what that language would look like and and you're looking at it, is there a recommendation on the substantive side, meaning you're setting a salary in the charter and then future adjustments are pursuant to whatever process, or are you just recommending a process be included in the charter for there to be review of council salaries?
Just to refocus on that, the council has the ability to change their salary. They don't lack that ability. And since they haven't, you can draw the conclusion that they didn't see the need to do it, whether it was political or otherwise. They didn't find the need to do it. So I think the compensation, along with the rest of the benefits, should be considered in totality, because those are the benefits, besides knowing that you're serving your city, of being on council. And they need to be frankly viewed in the context of the rest of the city staff and everyone else who is, doing their part to run the city. I just think it needs to maybe be visited more formally every 5 or 10 years through some sort of mechanism that we can maybe draw up here, but they have the ability to change their salaries tomorrow if they wanted to.
The sense I'm getting is that nobody disagrees that where they are now, especially relative to what state law says, is probably low. And there is I think that probably would discourage people from actually running if they realized how low it is, and how much time is actually involved. So it is not like they, like you said, they don't lack the authority now to get there. So the question is, do we give them a leg up in process?
Well, I guess not a leg up. Do we give them a discrete, defined, clear process, which is outside of their direct action? So I think that's what unless or you could say they are obligated to vote every 5 years on their salary. I mean, you could do that, theoretically.
To me,
Or
it's-
whatever, X number of years.
No. I kind of like that.
Think out loud for a minute.
Yeah, go for it.
To me, it's a matter of just if the language is equitable. And I think they would have raised their salary if the language was equitable in terms of where it was and where it is currently, in current day. And so I'm not even really trying to think about council. I'm thinking in terms of the language. And does the language match what other cities of our size do and how they compensate their council for time served? That's my last.
If I can think out loud for a moment, which is going to be, is admittedly going to be dangerous, because I guess maybe I'll start with kind of sort of a bias where I would agree, at least academically, I don't think a council manager form of government, a city this size, is designed for full-time council members. It's really designed for people who want to provide a service to the city. It's really the job of the city manager and the city staff to take care of the operational day-to-day issues. And I think in this academic world, the city council is really the policy body. So in terms of determining direction, setting priorities, setting budgets for the city manager and the appropriate staff to implement is really, I guess, in the ideal world where they're supposed to be with. I suspect that world is not that clean, and that operational issues will come to the attention of council members, which may then feel an obligation to become involved. I think I remember one council member who really did have truly had a 40-hour-a-week job that you could not walk away from, and the employer was kind enough to be able to let them have Tuesdays off to be able to do the council meetings, but they ran a full-time job and did council. That all being said, I'm also aware that it's like, hey, if you have the time, you can take a part-time job and turn it into a full-time job. The concept of work filling the time allotted, that if you want to do certain things or you have the time to do certain things, you may take on more responsibilities or attend more events or do other things. And so I'm trying to wrestle with how much time it really takes, because that all being said, I don't think council should be completely and totally uncompensated for the time that they put in. It is a service that I think should be the primary objective. My bias is I don't think it should be the full-time job for that particular person, at least in this city. And so now I was like, well, when I look at the numbers, based on the $14.50 a month, that's $17,000 a year. And I think if it's $25.50, my math might be a little off, that's $30,000 a year. That's not a huge dollar amount. And I suspect that I'm trying to remember the size of council packets and the time to be able to sit down, read, the time that you would need to spend with city staff to come up to speed on some issues. They're going to put some issues in that. Now, some of the other events, you could probably argue whether it's politics or whatever, but I think it's something at least we need to think about, because I'm not even sure 30,000 it's like, they could bring it to 30,000 right now. How we get there into a different process, I don't know that I'm comfortable at like 84. If we're going to throw numbers out there, I want to take a look at this a little bit, and I really want to hear from other people as to what they think it should kind of look like as it goes forward. But I think 17's way on the low side. I even think 30's probably not in the, for the amount of work to do. Should it be automatic? I have some concerns with that, because I have been in this city long enough to see economic downturns. I have been in the city long enough to see there are years where there are no raises. I can even remember a couple where there might have been some givebacks. And so I think if you're the policy board or the head of the city, it probably doesn't look really good if you're taking a 5% raise and everybody else is either being held solid or you're cutting back services. And so there's a balance in there somewhere to look at language where maybe automatic may not be the exact thing that you're looking for. Because the city does and will continue to face challenging fiscal times, and that policy board sets an example not only directly but sometimes symbolically.
I agree with you. I don't think this position requires any sort of automatic salary adjustment, either up or down. But there probably needs to be an improvement to how it's adjusted versus what we currently have.
I was up here thinking, I was thinking not out loud.
I kind of like the idea of having the state tell us where to start, only because if someone's thinking of running for council, has, say, 2 full-time-ish jobs, and is thinking, I can't do it unless they pay me a little bit more, and if that person is going to represent a certain group in the city that is currently unrepresented, I think it's worth for us to give them that chance to have them understand, okay, at least I'm going to get this much salary a month. I understand the compensation and stuff, but when you're living paycheck to paycheck, your salary is the most important to you. And even the $25.50 is low for Glendale in general. So starting at that would be the best, in my opinion, but going a bit more should be considered. But also the yearly percentage increase shouldn't be more than the least amount received from a city employee.
Next topic.
Is the way the charter's written now, is it such that they can't bring up the minimum? When state law minimum goes up, it doesn't automatically float to match?
Correct. It requires an action.
But state law doesn't have a minimum, does it? It has a maximum.
As a maximum.
Maximum,
Yeah.
sorry. Actually, good
I think we
question,
have
Ellen, the
enough to
adjustment.
think about.
Yeah, I came into this conversation having never really thought about this question too much, so I can see several sides to this. I think we've done a good job of kind of flushing that out. What's the sense of the room? I mean, we are going to return to this, but is there anything that we think we need to focus the conversation when we come back?
The total benefits,
Maybe I can summarize what I heard in terms of what you want us to bring back so far. Is that?
Please.
Okay, so I request to bring back the entire compensation package, including
Direct and
benefits
indirect,
and
yeah.
PERS and any other compensable items. You wanted, for comparison purposes, just the salaries for the city clerk and the city treasurer. Some more information on automatic adjustments, whether, to Mr. Durham's question about could it just be so that it's whatever the state law provides plus the adjustments. One thing that I thought in the discussion we would bring back, maybe give you some of the samples of some of the cities that have the salary setting process in their charter, whether it's a committee or whatever, give you the exact language, so maybe give you some ideas on what might work.
I'm particularly interested in how often they do that.
Yeah, we'll look for some of those. So that's so far what I have in terms of what I heard you asking us to bring back.
If the information is available, is it possible to find out more what Pasadena did? Specifically, I see they established a compensation commission.
Yeah.
It's kind of, which is what, in a sense, we're doing with the charter, and then not to exceed 5%. Like, if there's more details around what they did.
We can do that.
That could be helpful.
We can do that.
That was a one-time.
That was a one-time, but we can certainly get that.
Alan?
This is a related question, so I thought I'd try to jump in at this point. So, for instance, Pasadena, if you have a salary-setting commission, they have decision-making authority, unlike us who just would make a recommendation and then it would go back to council. Do they actually have the decision-making authority to implement those salary increases?
I don't know. I'll have to check. I think it was recommendation only.
Because then it just kind of flows back
Sure.
to the city council, who may be reluctant to.
Sure. But I think the idea is you have a committee of citizens who are not the elected officials making recommendations, and if the council's going to veer from that, they're going to have a really good justification to do so. But that's the idea. But your point's well taken, and we'll see if we can find a city. I think there are a couple cities that have it where their commission sets it, period, end of story.
Yeah, if the separate commission is actually setting the number, there's just going to be a lot of, the politics shift to the selection of that commission.
Well,
You
yeah,
know,
I mean,
like-
that's definitely a problem.
Yeah.
But then, if they recommend an increase and the council's reluctant to increase their own salaries, they might just ignore it.
Yeah. And if they ignore the recommendation that would be in their favor, that's their choice, and they may have.
Yeah, but then we're kind of back in the same boat we are now.
Yeah.
Well, as I hear this discussion go on, we haven't lacked candidates for city council with the current structure, and we don't lack the ability to allow council to change their compensation. We just need to, I guess, the discussion coming to us is, do you want to change the way the charter is currently worded? And do we feel that by changing it, we would end up with better governance, right? And I don't know.
Okay. Well, I'm going to suggest we close this item. Oh!
I know it's probably going to be extremely difficult to research, but I'm just curious, and maybe it's something I should look at. But if we can find out when the salary increases took place for the major cities, like Fresno's at 6,000, if we saw diversification in council compared to before, it would be interesting to see if that helps, like Inglewood, Chula Vista, And I know it's going to be a difficult ask.
We
but-
can see what we can do. The Englewood, Fresno, and what was the other city?
Sacramento.
Okay. That's one of the largest.
Yeah.
Okay.
The high salaries.
We'll dig into that. I think Englewood's relatively recent. I can't speak about the other cities.
All right, are we ready to move on then to the simpler, easy
Yeah,
topic
right.
of campaign finance? Okay, do we have a report?
A brief one.
Okay.
Put that slide deck back up. I actually have mine. So, I thought I'd just give a little background on what we currently do, the city currently does, and then the committee can certainly ask questions and see kind of where additional information you want. Again, like the prior item, it was anticipated to kind of give you this primer, and then you could tell us where you want to go with it. Glendale's had local campaign finance since 2008. We had something prior to that, but it was mainly related to filing requirements. But in terms of restrictions on campaign contributions or who they can be made to or when they can be made, our real substantive ordinance first took effect in 2008. Our legislative scheme has a couple components to it. We have limitations on campaign contributions, and I'll discuss those in a little bit. We have regulations pertaining to loans to campaigns. We have provisions regarding prohibitions on specified contributions from developers, contractors, meaning the timing of when those contributions are made relative to the decisions that might be coming before City Council. We have provisions regarding non-monetary contributions, so in-kind contributions that are made to candidates, how those are reported, and limitations on those as well. We have provisions dealing with excess campaign funds, so funds that are available after the campaign is over, what they have to be used for. And I'm not going to get into detail on all these because I was going to focus on just a couple of them. We have provisions related to office holder accounts, meaning after a candidate runs for office and if they're successful, provisions related to the use of campaign funds to create an office holder account that they can use for office purposes that the city doesn't necessarily pay for, such as donating to nonprofits or attending, making donations to nonprofits, various public purposes, and then fundraising for repayment of debt. So if a candidate runs and needs to raise money to pay off any outstanding debt they have, we have provisions on those. So next slide, please. So just two things, I think, because of the concept that was raised had to do with contribution limits. So we currently have a limitation on how much can be made to a candidate running for office in Glendale. It's currently $1,340. It was $1,000, and there have been some cost of living adjustments that have made. Spouses are treated as separate contributors. Contributions on dependent children are attributed to each parent. And then there's a provision regarding aggregation of contributions from related entities. So if you have a company where it's basically two companies but run by the same group of individuals, same shareholders or same majority shareholders, then those are treated as those are aggregated. So you can't get a contribution from both entities if they're really controlled by the same individuals. And then we have another section of our municipal code that was adopted in 2011 pertaining to contributions from developers, contractors, subcontractors, their agents, and that sort of thing, which actually is now mirrored by state law, but we've had it in place a little bit longer. So it essentially prohibits contributions from land use applicants, developers, or contractors who are seeking a contract from the city when the application is pending and for a 12-month period after the council makes a decision. And in the converse of that, if a council member has received a contribution from somebody, one of those entities, the developer or their contractor or contractors who are seeking a contract with the city, if they've received a contribution, it prohibits the council member from participating in a decision that affects that donor for a 12-month period after that. So that's kind of what we have on the books now. It's in our municipal code. It's not in our charter. The council, I think, adopted it, felt like it was important to have those provisions. I will note, without getting too deep into the weeds on campaign finance law, but the courts have made it pretty clear that government whether it's federal government, state government, local government, can restrict campaign contributions to candidates for the purpose of preventing corruption or the appearance of corruption. And so any campaign contribution limits have to be geared towards addressing one of those concerns. We used to have a provision, for example, that prohibited how much an individual can loan to his or her own campaign. And after looking at it, and there were some court cases that came and said that's essentially a contribution to yourself. That is, you cannot restrict that because you can't corrupt yourself. And then for the similar reasons why their courts have universally since 1974 struck down any limits on how much a candidate can spend on his or her own campaign. Raise as much money as you want, and government is without the power to regulate how much you spend on your campaign, unless, and we have this, unless you accept government financing. So that's the outline of kind of where we're at. So we wanted to see, is that something? And I would note also there's a state law that was enacted a couple of years ago. And again, our law is actually probably even more, that applies to contributions of $250 or more, that prohibits, again, council members from participating in decisions affected by their campaign donors.
So we don't have anything where the city helps finance someone running for election?
We do, and I can't remember the specifics of it, but it's a limited amount of money. And again, if they're willing to, maybe I can. It's new. It was only adopted a couple years ago. I don't think a candidate has taken advantage of it yet. And again, in exchange for not limiting how much you spend on your campaign, you can get a certain amount of contributions, a certain amount of financing to your campaign.
Just to be clear, the term contractors, because the city has a lot of consultants and consulting contracts. Are consultants considered contractors?
Yes, they are. And I would note that the only exception to this requirement in our code is for a contract that is bid to the lowest responsible bidder. So, yeah, because it's a blind process, and then in addition, the contract, since there's no discretion, the appearance potential for corruption is not the same as it is when you have a contract where ultimately the council has the discretion who that's going to go to. So yeah, I don't know if you've noticed, if you look at a council packet, we have a form that when we're taking land use applications to council, we're taking contracts that are over $50,000. We have either the contracting party or the applicant has to fill out this form saying who and it applies to not just the companies, but their agents. Their agents, the CEO, CFO, COO, and any shareholder who owns a shareholder, and any who owns 10% or more of the company. We have to provide this information to it, so the council will know these are the individuals who potentially could give rise to a conflict. So that information is all provided to the council before they go into a council meeting.
Just a quick question. So the conflict prohibition, there is no minimum amount for that donation? So whether it's $1 or $1,340, you are precluded from?
Correct. Under our code, yes.
Under
state
the
law,
muni
it's
code.
$250.
Okay.
The initial adoption reference here in 2008, is that the charter limit of 1340?
No, it's all in the municipal code. We don't.
That's question number one. I wasn't clear if
Yeah.
any of it was in the charter.
Yeah, this is all in the municipal
Charter's
code.
silent.
Yeah, the charter is silent as to these issues. It's all in the municipal code.
Okay.
Why did the council, as you understand it, refer this issue specifically to the Charter Commission then?
They didn't.
No, they didn't. I
Mr. Kerr,
yeah.
Mr. Kerr didn't ask for it.
So I was under the
When
impression
did
that
Paul get elected to the council? I'm just kidding.
I was under the impression that it was the limit was in our charter.
It's not.
Okay. So if we wanted to include it in the charter, that's something we could do.
Correct. Although, like I said, I do want to, at some point, we're going to be checking in with the council and getting further direction on these items.
Got it.
Was question regarding the question that was asked earlier about the money and the offsets, is that in relation to how much the candidate raises? Meaning, for example, if a candidate raises over 50,000, they pay X amount for their campaign. If they raise under that, it's waived. Is that what you were referring?
No, that was referring to the publicly funded campaign. We have a provision of our municipal code that allows for the city to pay for candidates to run for office, but they have to agree to certain limitations. And I think one of those limitations is to limit how much they spend.
And I think
It's what the federal program does.
Yeah, correct.
I think the aggregate cap is $50,000 in what they can raise, and then they can receive city assistance. I believe it's up to $4,000 or waiver of costs in the amount of $4,000.
So if they raise 50 and they agree to, or I'm sorry, if they agree to cap at 50, they get an additional $4,000.
Or a waiver in that amount, yeah.
There's
So,
a number
and I
of
would just-
fees to running for office that it's not that they get an additional 4,000. There's a number of fees to
Yeah.
run for office that I believe then the city pays.
Correct.
Is that
Or
what-
just
is
credits
that-
them, correct. And I
credits
think
them.
it was intended as a pilot to see, because it was not, I think the council wasn't at the time sure how it would work, or, so they wanted to test it out kind of as a pilot. So we haven't received any direction on that piece of it to bring any future items for discussion for them.
All right. Anybody want to hear public comment on this?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Herbert Molano. I would like to add a couple of observations to this. I was wondering if any of you were given in preparation for this topic any information concerning the actual filled out Form 460, which is the contribution forms that are generally done by the candidate. If not, I'd suggest that you look at the city clerk's website and see if you can identify and maybe print yourself a copy of some of the 460s that were filled out. Because the concern that I've had, as you know, I ran for office before, is that many of the candidates received money from companies in Florida and South Carolina, all over the place. You figure that this is a local election, and yet you find all of these entities and organizations sending money from across the country. I would imagine if somebody has a relative and parents and so forth, they want to send them there someplace else. Yeah, that's fine, it's understood. But when an organization is actually sending contributions, there are so many that it's actually very hard to figure out, well, this guy's just paving the way so that maybe 3 years from now, when this particular issue comes up, they've done a little bit of quid pro quo. And that thing is the item that is of huge concern to me, that we remove anything, even the appearance of corruption in any way. And the same thing with regard to the finance or the matching numbers should be tied into an amount limit per person. So they say, okay, all contributions that are in less than $250, they can be matched, as opposed to the larger contributions. Outside influence and the influence of vendors and contractors and individuals that may have something that will depend on a decision by the city council should be looked at really carefully. And whoever brought this up for discussion, I applaud you for it. Thank you very much.
Any other speakers in the room on this topic? Anybody on the phone?
There are no callers.
Okay. All right. Discussion. Paul, this was your topic?
Yeah. So how I got on the topic was in preparing for another topic and understanding potentially the shift to districts and how does that tie into the campaign finance ecosystem at large. And I didn't realize we had a limit here. I don't know what the limits are in other cities. That would be interesting, but it sounds like it's probably not germane to something that this charter review committee would do. But is there a state limit that is
There is
for
a
individuals?
maximum under state law now.
I think it's, apologies, I believe it's 4,900 unless a local agency adopts a different limit.
Okay. So the way I got on the topic was with independent expenditures, they're labeled independent, but I think they're independent in name only, functionally speaking. That's my opinion.
So cynical.
It's not a fact. You have, particularly if you went to districts, and I wanted to give, $2,000 to my candidate, and I really, really believe in that candidate. I couldn't do that, but I could give $2,000 to some organization, or $10,000 or $100,000, and they could support that candidate. I know that's an unfortunate function of where our current state of affairs are. We can't stop that, but we could essentially try to level the playing field for the individuals who, to Mr. Milano's point, live in the community, have a stake in the community, and if they really want to invest in someone who represents ideas that they believe in, then we should allow them to. So that's where my thinking came from. That was the initial spark of this. Hopefully, it's something
Less about the charters than more about how the council districts.
well,
or
how they all
non-districts
it all
play out.
plays together.
No, that's what I'm saying.
It all. You famously put it at the beginning of this process. You pull one string, and a whole bunch of others. It's tattooed on my brain. It's a very
So the idea being that if I support someone, I should be able to put all my eggs in one basket.
exactly, and particularly if I'm limited, right? So again, this was sparked by the discussion of districts and me thinking about the issue. So if I have an imaginary fence around me and I'm forced to pick someone who lives within 1.5 miles of me, that limits my abilities. So whatever money I've put together, if I really want this person to win, why am I limited? When, to Mr. Milano's point, someone out of state can, particularly businesses, they can just give money to some committee. And what's interesting is when you think about it, these committees that are formed, there are barriers to creating these committees. There's paperwork, there's cost.
But they're anonymous.
What's that?
They can be ultimately anonymous.
Well, anonymous is just a side benefit to those committees. But my point is, I can't. I mean, I'm not going to go create a committee to go, collect money. So it doesn't level the playing field for people here who have a stake in this community. And so that's how I got on the topic. It's tangentially germane, I guess, but I think it's worth discussing.
Just a question, because it came up as you're talking about it. Do you think it levels the playing field from the standpoint if there's a limit? It kind of makes sure that you have a broad base of support, that you can't have one superstar donor, realizing there's not a lot we can do with the independent expenditures.
It's a great point, Carl, but I think what it does is if you do have in your term a superstar donor, it's public. You know who that donor is.
Yeah.
So if someone wrote a $100,000 check, it would be filed in the Form 460, and we would know who that person is, and we would see the direct benefits. But that same person could give it to a committee, and that committee can spend that money, and you would have no idea. And that's just an unfortunate fact of where we are. So I always go back to what is going to get us better government, more responsive, less obfuscation of the truth. So that's how I got to this topic. Maybe 1,300 is not the right number, given that the state has a much higher limit. If the state has a higher limit, then it's probably worth thinking about. I don't know. Like I even looked at how much was raised by each candidate in the last election. If you look at their final 460s, how much they raised, how much they spent, it's shocking. There are people who didn't raise much and did really well, like almost nothing, and they did really well. And then there's people who raised a ton, and they won, and that's just the direct compensation. That's not anybody from the outside,
That's controlled money.
Anyways, I think you can't discuss the whole election system without addressing this topic. That's my point.
I would just note, I mean, if I could, Mr. Chair, just, maybe it's something to think, we can bring you back some more information on what some of the other cities our caps are. And I would, perhaps, I mean, to your point, if I'm an individual, I can spend, if there are 3 council races, for, at-large seats, and I can donate the $1,300 to each, to 3 people. Because we have a limitation on that too. There's an aggregate. If you can only spend so much. And maybe one recommendation is to the council, if you all get there at some point, is to say, consider another limit if we're going to go to districts versus actually putting in the charter. So that's just something to think about. But I don't know how you feel about it, but we can certainly bring you back the additional information on what some of the other cities do in terms of their limitations.
I would appreciate
Is the
that.
state law cap, does that apply to charter cities?
I believe it does, unless, I don't know if you have specific.
So there is under state law, there is a default cap on campaign contributions to city council elections. And my question was whether or not that is a statewide affair or if it's something that does not apply to a charter city.
I believe it does apply to charter cities unless the charter city establishes a lower limit, yes.
But that makes us no different than a general law city.
That is correct.
Okay. So there's no special authority we can't go higher or just say there is no limit.
That's right.
Okay.
2 things. Good point I see where you're going if we go towards districting in terms of this needing further discussion. Should the city not go towards districting, and if you are move to bring it back, one of the things that I would ask that you also include is perhaps the actual process. For example, having lived the experience, every donor, first, last name, occupation, everything about them is collected and reported. And you have to report monthly as a candidate. And so there are checks and balances every step of the way. And the FPPC, correct, will reach out to you if anything deviates. I found the process to be if there was ever a process that was kosher, it was this one. And so where I'm going with this statement, again, it's wherever the committee goes, it's up to this whole group. But under the premise of looking at districting, it would make sense to bring it back. But without it, my impression of my lived experience is it works pretty well. You can take it or leave it.
Just to clarify my position, if there was any ambiguity, my point is that the current process for individual donations is very transparent, as you mentioned, meaning you get all that information and anybody can look it up. But when you contrast that with an independent expenditure, which it's like night and day. One is very clear and one is a little bit more opaque. And so my point is that if we look at the overall election system, I think we need to look at all components of that system. And a major component of that is campaign finance and contributions.
One follow-up question to that. Aren't there guidelines around independent expenditures?
Yes, the Supreme Court has offered guidance. They said can't regulate it.
Do whatever you want.
Can't regulate it.
Right.
So were we to consider putting some language around it, what are we, first in the nation?
We would be.
Number 1 tree city and first in the nation.
Yeah,
I can't say number one.
It would be unlawful.
Yeah, just
Yeah, it
to
would
be
be-
just to be
so it would
clear,
be
I'm not
unlawful, so we
advocating
can't.
that because
Okay.
for that very reason. My point is that the individuals who live in the community.
He wants to lift the cap in order to level the playing
Yeah,
field.
what I'm saying is they potentially are at a disadvantage, right? So that's the point that dawned on me as I started to dive into and pull a string from the sweater. The other string came out. Well, that's not fair, especially if you make it hyper-focused. Then it's even more potentially at a disadvantage and lopsided. So, and what's interesting is I started to look at. I said, okay, well then let's take a look at districts, because districts that the school district implemented, and did we see a marked change in how the donations and the contributions worked after that shift? I haven't finished that dive, so I can't speak to that. But it feels to me, and it seems pretty rational, if you're going to look at one aspect of this system, you need to look at all the other significant and major and contributory aspects of it. You can't just look at one little bit of it.
We haven't heard from Stephen in a while.
Yeah. A couple of things. I would like a little more information on loans to campaign, if I could get that. Also, say Paul's going to run for city council. Can I create a political action committee to support him and raise as much money as I want?
I won't stop you.
And I could support him with $2 million if I wanted to.
Yeah, you just can't coordinate with them.
You can't
Right.
coordinate with him. You wouldn't be able to coordinate with him. You wouldn't be able to make a $2 million donation to that
him
campaign,
directly.
to his committee. But you could spend $2 million putting advertisements out saying,
For or against, right? It can go either way. I've seen filings of independent expenditures that are explicitly against a candidate. So, which is fine. The Supreme Court has decided that's their right. I'm not here to argue that. The point is, why should...
I'll argue it.
You're probably better at it than I am. I mean, I think the point is that are we putting the individuals who have vested interests, stakes, that are you can't even compare to anybody from outside the community, at a disadvantage? And I think there is cause to believe that you are, if you don't address that aspect of the election system.
I'm tending to agree with that, and I would like a fair, equal.
As fair as possible, right? We
Yeah.
have limits, but I think it's something that needs to be looked at, and that's where that's the impetus of my point in bringing it up.
Well, while we're having this discussion, I'm just curious, because, you talk about stakes in and out, setting aside independent expenditure. Is a dual cap legally permissible? So somebody who's a resident, can they have a higher cap than someone who's not a resident?
I think that'd be constitutionally suspect. But
That's why I'm asking.
I don't think you could.
Yeah, I don't think
I
you
think
could.
you can distinguish. I mean,
Right.
it's a First Amendment free speech.
No, I mean,
issue, so
independent
you-
expenditure, I'm just wondering if on a campaign, I'm kind of following up on a segment of
No, I
Paul's
know. No, I'm saying-
where people within the community
Yeah.
that have a stake are at a disadvantage. And so I'm just wondering, if you had.
Can we have a higher
Could
cap
you have a
on
higher
residents
cap
versus
if you have a resident versus a non-resident? You can do what you want on the independent expenditure. I'm just kind of curious, because it said that would tend to focus it to people who have a, as I said, I'm asking that knowing full well.
And
The
it's-
answer may be that it's constitutionally suspect.
It's an equal
as you
protection
said.
and
yeah.
First Amendment.
And probably enforcement challenges as well. Even if you-
I think it's just something more to think about, especially if we get some additional information from the attorney's office. It'll help us as we. I mean, these are serious topics, and I'm glad we're discussing them. This is what city government should be doing.
And filling potholes.
And filling potholes, and cutting down trees that need to be cut down, and we're very lucky
Do you
to live in
wanna
a
say
city
that
that
right
does that. How about that?
We're not talking about
I said
trees
that
right
need to be cut down. Not all of them for sure. Yeah, the ones that block, because there are some oak trees or some other trees that are like really low.
You're
and,
pulling more out of the sweater.
I'll shut up now.
Friendly advice, that's all.
I have one question.
Please.
What are the penalties in violating the transparency in, basically, campaign contributions and so on?
So for our ordinance, it's there are civil remedies. We basically just try to get folks to comply, but technically it's a misdemeanor of the municipal code, which is punishable 6 months or $1,000 fine.
It's a crime.
It's crime, yeah. I think we may also include them in admin sites as well. I'd have to check, but we can get that information to you as well.
Admin citations.
Oh, administrative citations, sorry. So there's like a $100, $200, $400 schedule of fines that are associated with it as well.
All right, I think we're done this topic for the night. Okay. Moving on, future agenda. This was agendizing to continue discussion of the questions of directly elected mayor and council districts. As everybody will recall, we deadlocked on the question at the last meeting, and we thought we'd try again, but with a full complement, but we knew we were going to be missing some people tonight, so the thought was to figure out if there was potentially, I think, a special meeting date, or
correct.
just bring it back to the next meeting.
For June, and I think, obviously we don't have everybody here, but if we'll reach out to see if we're going to get full attendance for the June meeting, and if not, then we'll try to schedule a meeting between, the special meeting between, 2 weeks from now to 6 weeks out, and see what works in terms of getting everybody's availability.
And given that there's 12 people in the committee, and there's several staff people to coordinate, and we have to find a room, I personally am open to the idea of alternative dates and times, because this would be a special meeting, which we can do in 24 hours notice. But, so when you're asked to provide times for your availability, or just keep in mind that we are not locked into this time or this room, that, if you have flexibility, please try to make an effort if we need to call a special meeting, because the council, once our recommendation on this issue, I'd really like at least to get a chance at one more vote with the full complement, see if we can make a decision. If not, figure out how we want to deliver our non-recommendation to the council.
Could we use one of those scheduling apps where everybody kind of votes and?
A Survey Monkey?
Something like that, whatever. There's 100 of them floating around.
We could probably try that. We can do that. Yeah, we'll do that. It's a good idea.
The staff had to look into the availability of the rooms, and they have other jobs.
Regarding other future comments, are you taking suggestions? Agenda.
That certainly fits within the agenda description. Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be the next agenda, but just following up with the public comment on the elected city attorney position. But I would like to take it in the form of when we discuss the elected mayor, so that we're looking at the whole landscape instead of, and one last question as a follow-up to that. Does any city have an elected city manager?
No.
It's called a mayor.
It's called a strong mayor, yeah.
It's called a strong mayor?
Yeah.
Okay, that's probably why.
Right.
So it doesn't matter to me, Chair Flower, when you bring it back, but just so we do address it. And then to our second public comment, I was looking in the charter, and again, it doesn't matter when you bring it back, but in relation to the trees and the cutting down, there is language in the charter that allows us to look at that. There is an element. You want me to find it? It's under miscellaneous. Yeah. Opening, et cetera, of streets, planting of trees, public improvement, not elsewhere for provided in the charter. Would that language be language where we,
Where the council discusses how to cut down trees? I'm not following.
well, we had a public comment asking us to do something or a call to action. We either do nothing to the public comment, or if we are going to do something, I'm wondering if this language, and if staff wants to look at that and tell us. But each time a public member comes here, I feel like we're obligated to either say, that's not in our scope, or it's in our scope.
Sure.
And if it's in our scope, let's figure out where we're going to put it
Right.
someplace at some future date, whenever
I'd be
you
willing
decide.
to entertain the topic, but I would probably put it at the back of the queue of the
Whenever.
topics that the
Yeah.
council has specifically
That's your purview,
pointed us
yeah.
to. Well, no,
Is it-
it's what the group wants to do, but
Sure.
that's my inclination is
Right.
to, we haven't gotten to Civil Service Commission.
Well, at least making sure that as we have public members come here, that they know that it's somewhere out.
And I thank you for bringing that back to the group's attention. That was fair point, well made.
I attended a couple of weeks ago, I attended a special community meeting. It had to do with the tree cutting going on at Glendale Garden Homes. And it was sponsored by the city. Bradley Calvert, the director of community development, ran the meeting. I don't believe there, Mike, there was anybody from legal. It was basically community development. But probably 15 residents attended. And we were told that there's nothing the city of Glendale can legally do in terms of preventing someone from cutting down trees on private property as long as they're not protected species. And Glendale Garden Homes has, with the current CAL FIRE maps, is now located in a high fire risk zone. So the fire department went there and said, well, yeah, these trees are within 5 feet of these buildings, and the branches are overhanging, and it is a fire hazard. And then Jay Platt, our principal planner with respect to historic preservation, said, well, the gardens aren't really, because there's a pending EIR for Glendale Garden Homes. And Jay Platt said, he wasn't at the meeting, but on a visit to the site, he said, well, it's the buildings and the way they're laid out. It's not the landscaping, existing landscaping, that's going to determine whether the EIR says it's a historic resource. So I just wanted to add that because there has been this controversy about tree cutting there.
Yeah,
And the city basically told us.
But that's something that can be regulated by ordinance, and I'm not going to express opinion on what the city can or can't do by ordinance on that specific topic, but I don't see it as something for the charter committee to address at this point.
I would have to agree to that one. It'd be a little bit outside the scope, unless council said study it, but the council will have multiple ways of addressing that.
Or, if I may, Chair, the treasurer, this point that was brought up, are the qualifications of the treasurer outlined in the charter?
I don't think they are.
I don't believe
it just
they
says
are.
that there is a city treasurer.
Right.
Okay. Are there?
And to my knowledge, under state law, there is no set of requirements for a city treasurer, whether appointed or elected.
But theoretically, you could create one as a city if you wanted to.
Correct.
It's a full-time position. I'm coming in blind. I haven't studied this at all. So if my questions are silly, please excuse them. In terms of the in terms of the treasurer, it's a full-time position, salaried.
Correct.
But however, it's elected.
Correct.
Just like city clerk. And the qualifications or lack thereof. It's a vote. So
It's the minimum number of signatures to get on the ballot.
Exactly. So, however, it strikes me. I'm thinking real time. It's a technical position in some pretty significant aspects.
That's what, and a lot of cities, for that reason, same with the clerk, make them appointed.
And other cities have them appointed by whom? By council?
council.
Usually by the city council, yes.
Okay.
For the same reason that a lot of cities have an appointed
Because
city
we have
attorney.
$1 billion budget, I think.
The treasurer? Both. Yeah, there are some models where the city manager approves subject to council approval, and others where it's the council. Your question was?
I made a statement / question. So the budget's $1 billion roughly. Is that
The
correct?
city's,
City budget.
all funds is about 1.2 billion.
Correct, 1.2.
So somebody who has a significant charisma to get elected as treasurer, but lacks the technical expertise to help guide that process.
Can I make this request that we have a report back at some point with what the duties are of the city treasurer, and we can discuss then about whether or not
Yeah, that's a
we
good
want to
idea.
consider making a recommendation on imposing qualifications, because I'm not even sure if we can set qualifications, but I know we can't, there's certain limits on our ability to set qualifications on council members.
Right.
So
I think it's a little bit different for clerk
I
and
imagine
treasurer,
it could be,
I think,
but
I think the city of Torrance went through this recently, so we can get, maybe we'll do is the next agenda, we'll put it just on, not an action, but on reports, kind of just what
That
the
would be
basic
helpful.
information.
yeah, just an information item,
Yeah.
and then we can decide whether or not we want to have it, yeah.
Sure.
That's
And
great. Thank you.
I do, yeah, I would hope,
And-
once we get some the committee makes a decision on a recommendation or non-recommendation on the district mayor piece of it, we will be checking with council, and then there's some of these items we can see where the council is, if they want to have the committees move further on some of these items. But we'll, as far as that, I will definitely provide that information.
Thank you.
If there's nothing else for the good of order, the next item
Chair,
on the
we have
agenda
one
is
request to
adjournment.
speak for 8A from the audience.
On the issue of free chair agendas, we have a speaker.
Yes.
All right.
Commissioner, thank you. I'll be very brief. Just to reiterate my desire for a strong mayor. A primer, this is a primer for the next discussion, whenever you do discuss this, in my opinion, I think there should be a lottery system in the sense of when it comes to election of a mayor, a lottery would be a way to consider a way to root out corruption. They did it in Venice with the 7 rounds of and so on lottery. One more point: council districts. I'm a bit technical here in the sense of suspicious, so I'll bring a much more detailed analysis of why I think larger decisions will be needed. I'm repeating myself, but the fires and Eaton, Palisades, the map of Glendale now, basically, even the areas that are not red, but basically Glendale is surrounded by, so it can only be addressed from a larger perspective. And if you can, I insist you bring up or somehow agendize the 3 items. Thank you to the commissioners for discussing it. I do think that this language can be cleared up. Not just indigenous trees, but maybe all mature trees or whatever can be protected. Of course, I respect the decision, my God, of the arborist, the fire department, and so on. The trees cannot be brought back, but we can try to make it sure that something like that doesn't happen again. But thank you so much. Again, I'm very sincerely thankful. I'll come again to talk about the mayoral, stronger mayor. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, good night, folks.